Commander Elias Trent leaned back in his pilot seat, eyes scanning the stars outside the window of his transport shuttle. The stars were calm, peaceful, but peace rarely lasted on the edge of the galaxy. His mission was simple: escort a small group of diplomats from the Human Alliance to the Mirren Star Empire's capital world. The humans had recently signed a peace treaty with the Mirrens after decades of quiet tension. This mission was supposed to be a gesture of trust. ETA to Mirren territory in 10 minutes, his co-pilot, Harris, announced. Elias nodded. Keep scanning for anything unusual. We're not in the core systems yet. The ship moved silently through space, passing near an asteroid belt. On board, the Mirren diplomats sat in the back chamber, elegant beings with tall silver-blue forms and glowing eyes. Among them was a figure who said very little. Princess Yalara, daughter of King Thalor, the ruler of the Mirren Empire. Her presence was unexpected, added at the last minute. She had chosen to observe the diplomatic trip herself, which made security much more serious. Elias had read her file. Smart, calm, trained in science and history, but still royalty. Suddenly, the ship's alert system blared. "Multiple hostiles incoming," Harris shouted. 12 fighters, unknown origin. "Shields up," Elias ordered, gripping the controls. "Evade now." The enemy ships were fast and aggressive. They didn't send any warning messages, no demands. They fired instantly. Laser blasts lit up the dark sky as Elias pulled hard to the left, dodging one shot, but another clipped the wing. Sparks flew in the cabin. The ship rocked violently. "We can't outrun them," Harris yelled. "We're going down." Elias made a quick decision. "Prepare for emergency crash landing. Aim for that moon. Coordinates 9247. The ship dived through the thin atmosphere of a nearby moon. Its surface was rocky, full of cliffs and dry valleys. The shuttle crashed hard, skidding across a flat plain before finally stopping. The cabin was in chaos. Smoke filled the air. Alarms continued to scream. Elias unbuckled and stumbled to his feet. He turned to see Harris unconscious beside him. "Medical," he called into the comm. No reply. He ran to the back chamber. The Mirren guards were gone, dead or scattered. But Princess Yalara was still there, sitting upright, her breathing sharp but steady. "You're alive," Elias said, surprised. "I'm fine," she replied, standing with dignity. "Where are we?" "A moon. Unknown name." "No contact with the fleet," Elias answered quickly. "And we're not alone." Just then, a sharp sound echoed in the distance. Hovercraft engines. Enemy drones. "They're hunting survivors," Elias muttered. "We have to move." Yalara hesitated. "My people are either gone or hiding," he said firmly. "If we stay here, we're dead too. Come on." He grabbed a small pack of supplies and led her out of the broken ship. The moon's surface was harsh, dusty, dry, and full of sharp rocks. The air was thin but breathable. They climbed through a narrow canyon, searching for cover. Hours passed. They didn't speak much. Elias focused on survival, reading the land, watching the sky, listening for drones. Yalara followed closely, her long robe torn and her silver hair dusty, but her eyes alert. As the sun began to set, they reached a hidden cave in the cliffside. Elias used a small scanner to check for energy signals. None close. "We'll rest here," he said. "At least for a while." Inside, the cave was cool and dark. Elias built a small heater from scraps and offered her half of a protein bar. Yalara accepted it silently, then finally spoke. "You risked your life for me." "I didn't have a choice," Elias said, managing a small smile. "You're royalty. If anything happened to you, this peace mission would become a war. But your ship, your crew." She looked down. "I'll mourn them later," Elias replied quietly. Right now, I have to keep you alive." For a moment, silence settled between them. Then Yalara pulled out a small device from her belt, a Mirren emergency beacon. She turned it on, but the light blinked red. "It's jammed," she said. "Someone doesn't want us found." Elias sighed. Figures. Outside, the sound of drones returned, closer this time. Yalara stood. "Then we hide deeper. Come." Elias looked at her in surprise. She wasn't just a princess. She had strength. Together, they moved deeper into the shadows of the cave, their path uncertain, but their will unshaken, and somewhere above, the galaxy was beginning to whisper about the strange story of a human and an alien princess, running together across the stars. The night came quickly on the barren moon, bringing with it a coldness that seemed to seep into every bone. Inside the cave, Elias and Princess Yalara sat huddled together by the small, flickering heater. Outside, the sound of enemy drones echoed faintly, their high-pitched engines a constant reminder of the danger lurking just beyond the rocks. Elias glanced at Yalara. She sat quietly, her silver-blue skin glistening faintly in the low light, her face thoughtful. Despite the circumstances, there was a certain calm about her, an inner strength he hadn't expected. She was a royal, of course, but she wasn't acting like someone who had been pampered her entire life. She seemed determined to survive, not helpless. "I've been thinking about the drones," Elias said, breaking the silence. Yalara looked up at him, her eyes glowing softly in the dim light. "What about them?" "They're not just hunting for us," Elias said, his voice low. "They're sweeping the area, looking for survivors, looking for anything that could give them a reason to attack again. We need to be careful. Move only when we're sure we're not spotted." Yalara nodded. "I understand, but we cannot hide forever. My people will come. They'll search for me." "I hope so," Elias muttered, adjusting his position against the wall. He had his doubts. The Mirren Empire was vast, and they weren't exactly known for their speed when it came to rescuing those in danger. He knew the king's soldiers would eventually search for his daughter, but he wasn't sure how long it would take. In the meantime, he would do what he could to protect her. The cave felt too quiet. The flicker of the heater was the only sound. Elias shifted uncomfortably. "We'll need to find a better place to hide. This spot isn't safe." Yalara looked around, her gaze scanning the walls. "There must be more tunnels here. My people have hidden away from danger before. Perhaps the old ruins nearby." "Ruins?" Elias asked, interrupting her. "What ruins?" Yalara hesitated. "Ancient Mirren structures. No one has visited them in centuries, but they're still there. If we can reach them, they may offer better shelter, and perhaps something to help us." Elias raised an eyebrow. "You think these ruins might have something useful?" "I'm not certain, but it's possible," Yalara said. "My people were great builders. We stored knowledge and resources. In places like these, it's worth the risk." Elias studied her face, trying to judge if she was simply grasping at straws, but there was a glint of certainty in her eyes. She believed in the ruins. And right now, he didn't have many options. The longer they stayed in this cave, the more exposed they became. "All right," Elias said, pushing himself to his feet. "We'll give it a shot. Can you lead the way?" Yalara nodded and stood as well. She moved gracefully, a natural sense of direction in her step. Elias quickly packed up their minimal supplies, making sure his blaster was secured at his side. Though he didn't expect to use it, he knew better than to leave it behind. They left the cave and stepped back into the cold night air. The sky above was an endless sea of stars, twinkling brightly against the inky blackness of space. They had no idea how far they were from civilization, no way of knowing if they were close to Mirren or light years away. The thought nagged at Elias. Time was running out. "We have to move fast," Elias said. Those drones will be searching again soon. Yalara led the way, her movements sure and steady as she navigated through the rocky terrain. Elias followed, his boots crunching against the dusty ground. The darkness felt oppressive, the wind whistling past them, but Yalara seemed undeterred, her confidence in the path ahead clear. They walked for what seemed like hours, Elias occasionally, glancing up to check for any signs of the drones. He could hear them in the distance, their engines growing louder and closer. The last thing they needed was to be found now. "Almost there," Yalara said after a while. "The ruins are just ahead." Elias took a deep breath. "Let's hope they're still standing." Ahead, through the darkness, Elias spotted a silhouette, a broken structure half hidden behind the jagged cliffs. As they drew nearer, he saw what Yalara had meant. The ruins were ancient, worn by time and erosion. Great stone arches reached into the sky, and crumbled walls lined the edges of what might have once been a grand city. It was eerily quiet here, the only sounds the wind and their footsteps. "This is it," Yalara said, her voice tinged with a sense of awe. "We are safe for now." Elias looked around, scanning the ruins for any signs of danger. The place had a strange feeling to it, like it was forgotten, abandoned by all but the stars. "We'll have to be careful," Elias warned. "This place may not be as empty as it looks." Yalara nodded, understanding the need for caution. She led Elias deep, into the ruins, weaving through the stone pathways and ruins of ancient structures. They came upon a large archway, covered in ancient symbols. "Here," Yalara said, stopping in front of the archway. "This was once a place of knowledge. The Mirren archives are within." Elias raised an eyebrow. "You think we'll find something useful here?" "If we're lucky," Yalara said, a small smile forming on her lips. "And if not, we'll at least be hidden from the drones." Elias nodded. For now, that was enough. They had time. And in the silence of the ancient ruins, the only thing left to do was wait and plan their next move. The ancient Mirren ruins were dark and silent. The stone walls seemed to whisper of a time long past, a civilization that had once thrived but now stood forgotten in the shadow of the stars. The air was cool, and the silence was thick, broken only by their quiet footsteps as Elias and Yalara made their way deeper into the ruined city. Elias couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, though every scan of the area showed nothing. He had learned to trust his instincts over the years, and right now, those instincts were telling him something wasn't quite right. "Do you think we're safe here?" Elias asked, his voice low. Yalara paused in front of an archway that led into what appeared to be an ancient library. The walls were covered with strange symbols, some glowing faintly in the dim light. She looked back at him, her expression calm but her eyes wary. "I hope so," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. "But I cannot be certain. The drones will not give up easily." Elias nodded. He wasn't so sure about the ruins being completely safe, but right now, they had no choice. The drones had been getting closer, their engines echoing across the rocky plains outside. He knew they had to keep moving. "Let's keep going," Elias said, stepping forward into the dark library. The air smelled old, filled with the musty scent of forgotten books and stone. The dim glow from Yalara's communicator illuminated a small path leading deeper inside. Yalara led the way, and Elias followed close behind, his hand resting on the blaster at his side, just in case. The silence was oppressive, the kind of silence that made every creak of the ancient stone sound like an alarm. But they pressed on, deeper into the ruin. As they rounded a corner, Elias's heart skipped a beat. A figure stepped out from the shadows, startling them both. A Mirren soldier, dressed in dark armor, stood blocking the path. He was tall, even for a Mirren, with glowing eyes that narrowed as he studied them. "Who are you?" the soldier demanded in a deep voice. His hand rested on the hilt of a blade, and his posture was tense, ready for a fight. Elias didn't hesitate. He raised his hands, trying to show that he meant no harm. "We're survivors. We were attacked. We didn't mean to intrude." Yalara stepped forward, her eyes widening slightly as she recognized the soldier. "I know him," she said quietly. "This is Captain Kolar. He's one of my father's top commanders." Captain Kolar's eyes flickered between Yalara and Elias. He seemed to hesitate, then slowly lowered his hand from his blade. "Princess Yalara," he said, his voice softer now. "We thought you were lost. My men have been searching for you." Elias exhaled quietly, relieved. But his relief was short-lived. Kolar's gaze shifted to Elias. "And this one?" Kolar asked, his tone a bit sharper. "A human? What is he doing here?" "He saved my life," Yalara explained. "I was on a diplomatic mission when we were ambushed. This human, Elias, helped me escape." Kolar studied Elias for a moment longer, then nodded. "Very well. If he helped you, he is welcome to stay. But the Mirren Empire does not take kindly to intruders. He will need to be cleared of suspicion." Elias couldn't help but feel the weight of Kolar's words. He was a stranger in a strange land, and his presence here might bring trouble to Yalara. But he couldn't worry about that now. They needed to get out of here before the drones found them. "Do you have a way out of here?" Elias asked, his eyes scanning the dark hallway behind them. Kolar nodded. "There is a hidden tunnel beneath the ruins. It leads to a secure location outside the city. We can use it to escape." Yalara turned to Elias. "This is our best chance. We need to move quickly." Elias didn't hesitate. "Lead the way." Kolar turned on his heel and led them down a narrow corridor that twisted and turned beneath the ruins. The further they went, the more ancient and weathered the stone walls became. Finally, they reached a large stone door. Kolar pushed against the door, which groaned open to reveal a long tunnel that sloped downward. "This will take us to safety," Kolar said, motioning for them to follow. Elias followed closely behind Yalara, his senses alert as they made their way down the tunnel. The sound of the drones outside was growing louder, the whirring of their engines echoing through the tunnels. They had no time to waste. The tunnel stretched for what felt like miles, winding beneath the city. The walls were damp and slick with age, but the path was clear. As they walked, Elias felt a deep sense of unease. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, but he pushed the thought aside. They had to focus on getting out of here. Finally, the tunnel opened up into a large cavern. Ahead, the entrance to the surface was visible, a narrow crack in the rock that led out into the open. Kolar moved ahead, his eyes scanning the area before he motioned for them to follow. "This is it," Kolar said. "Once we reach the surface, we'll be able to contact my forces and get you back to safety." Yalara nodded, her expression serious. Elias looked up, the cold moonlight reflecting off the jagged rocks above. They were close, so close. But just as they reached the entrance, the sound of the drones outside grew deafening. The engines roared closer, and Elias knew they didn't have much time. They had to move now. "Go!" Elias shouted, urging Yalara forward. He followed closely behind, his heart pounding in his chest. They reached the surface just as the drones began to descend. The sky above was dark, but the stars shimmered faintly, like a distant promise of hope. Kolar led them to a small transport vehicle hidden in the rocks. "Get in," he ordered. "We have to move now." Yalara climbed into the vehicle, and Elias followed. As the engine roared to life, they sped off into the night, the drones in hot pursuit. But they had one advantage: time. And right now, time was on their side. The transport vehicle raced through the rocky landscape, kicking up clouds of dust as it sped across the uneven ground. Elias sat beside Princess Yalara, his eyes darting between the road ahead and the faint glow of the drones still trailing them in the distance. The Mirren soldiers in the vehicle were focused, their eyes sharp and ready for anything. The sound of the drone's engines still echoed in the air, but their pursuit seemed to slow as the vehicle entered a narrow canyon where the rocky cliffs blocked the view. "We're safe for now," Kolar, the captain, said, his voice steady. "But we need to reach the city quickly. The king will want to hear of your survival, princess." Yalara nodded, her gaze distant. Elias could tell she was thinking about the larger implications of their escape, the rescue, the mission, and what this would mean for her people. She had been silent for much of the journey, but Elias could understand why. Her world had just shifted from one of royal expectation to one of survival. As they approached a hidden Mirren outpost on the edge of the canyon, Kolar motioned for the driver to slow down. "We'll make a brief stop here. You can rest for a few moments, but we need to move quickly. The king will want a full report on what happened." Elias barely had time to catch his breath before the vehicle came to a stop. They were surrounded by Mirren soldiers, their dark armor glinting in the dim light. The outpost was a simple structure, built into the mountainside, a stark contrast to the sprawling cities Elias had seen in the more peaceful parts of the galaxy. Kolar turned to Elias. "You'll need to come with me. The king wishes to speak with you as well." Elias looked at Yalara, who seemed to have regained some of her composure. She gave him a slight nod, and Elias followed Kolar as they made their way toward a large stone building at the center of the outpost. Inside, the building was cooler, with stone walls adorned with tapestries and paintings that depicted the Mirren Empire's history. Elias was impressed despite the circumstances. The Mirrens had a deep respect for their past, and it showed in the way they preserved their culture. At the far end of the room sat a large throne, made of polished black stone. On it sat King Thalor, a tall figure with silver skin and piercing, violet eyes. His presence was commanding, and his expression was both regal and intense. "Commander Elias Trent," the king's voice echoed through the room. "I've heard much about your actions today. You saved my daughter, and for that, I owe you my gratitude." Elias stood before the throne, feeling the weight of the king's gaze. Despite the warmth in his words, there was something calculating in the king's eyes. This wasn't just about gratitude. It was about something much larger. In the galaxy, an archive of lost technologies, forgotten histories, and universal secrets. To be granted access to it was unimaginable. "Thank you, Your Majesty," Elias said, trying to hide his surprise. "I accept." King Thalor's eyes sparkled with something like approval. "You are wise, Commander. We Mirrens have much to offer, and now, so do you. Use this knowledge well." Yalara's expression softened, and she stepped closer to Elias. "You are not like the others," she said quietly. "You are not here for power. That is something my people can respect." Elias smiled, though it was more to himself than to anyone else. The thought of gaining access to the Vault of Echoes filled him with a sense of purpose. His journey was far from over, and now it had taken an unexpected turn. The galaxy was vast, and in it, humanity's place was still being written. With this knowledge, perhaps they could carve out a future of their own. But for now, Elias remained, focused on the present, on the task ahead. He had made an ally today, and that ally was a king. The days following Elias's meeting with King Thalor were a blur of preparations and briefings. The Mirren Palace was a place of order, yet beneath the calm exterior there was an undercurrent of tension. Elias could feel it in the air, the weight of expectations, the knowledge that something important was happening. His life had shifted, from that of a soldier to something far more complicated. Yalara was with him as they made their way through the palace corridors. The halls were wide, lined with intricate carvings and soft lighting that bathed everything in a golden glow. Her presence had changed too. Where she had once seemed distant, Now she was more open, though still reserved. They had shared many quiet conversations about the journey, but she still carried the weight of her royal responsibilities. "You seem deep in thought," Yalara said, her voice breaking the silence. "You've been unusually quiet today." Elias looked over at her. "Just thinking about what the king said. The Vault of Echoes. I can hardly believe it." Yalara smiled faintly. "The vault is a treasure, yes, but it is also dangerous. Many who sought access never returned. It's not just knowledge, it's a challenge. My people guard it fiercely. Only those with the proper honor and strength are allowed entry." Elias considered her words. He had been a soldier, trained in strategy and survival. But the Vault of Echoes was not a battlefield. It was a place where knowledge could change the fate of entire civilizations. For a moment, he wondered if he was ready for such responsibility. "You think I'm not ready?" Elias asked, reading the doubt in her expression. Yalara shook her head. "No, it's not that. But the vault changes those who enter it. It's not just information. It's understanding. It opens doors that some might prefer to keep closed." Elias nodded slowly. The Mirren Empire had its secrets, ancient knowledge that had been lost to time. It was said that the Vault of Echoes held the key to advanced technology, forgotten histories, and even potential threats to the galaxy. What he learned there could shape not only his future but humanity's place in the stars. Their conversation was interrupted as they reached the entrance to a large, guarded chamber. 2 Mirren soldiers stood at attention, their armor gleaming in the soft light. They nodded to Yalara, who returned the gesture with a silent acknowledgement. The doors to the chamber opened, revealing King Thalor sitting upon his throne. His expression serious. "Commander Elias Trent," the king said as he gestured for them to approach. "It is time. You are to be granted access to the Vault of Echoes." Elias stepped forward, his heart pounding. The room felt like it was charged with energy. This was it, the moment that could change everything. He could already feel the weight of history pressing down on him. King Thalor stood, his tall figure imposing yet regal. "Before you enter, there are a few things you must understand. The vault is not simply a place of knowledge. It is a reflection of the past, present, and future. You must approach it with respect." "I understand, Your Majesty," Elias said. "I don't seek to control what I find. I only wish to learn." Thalor studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Good. You are wise to say that. Knowledge is a gift, but it can also be a curse. Be mindful of what you discover." The king turned to Yalara. "You will accompany him, as it is customary. Your presence will ensure that the sacred bond between the Mirren people and the human race is respected during this process." Yalara bowed her head in acknowledgement. "Of course, Father." The king then turned to a set of ornate doors behind his throne. He raised a hand, and the doors slowly opened, revealing a hidden passage that led downward into the depths of the palace. The air grew cooler as they descended, and the walls were lined with strange symbols, ancient Mirren texts that were unlike anything Elias had ever seen. At the end of the passage they arrived at a massive stone door, its surface covered in intricate carvings that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. Elias could feel the weight of the moment. This was no ordinary door. This was the gateway to something far beyond his understanding. King Thalor stepped forward and placed his hand on the door. The carvings began to glow, and the door slowly creaked open, revealing the Vault of Echoes. Inside was a vast chamber, far larger than Elias could have imagined. The walls were lined with towering shelves filled with scrolls, books, and ancient relics. Some of the items pulsed with an eerie light, while others were covered in thick layers of dust, forgotten by time. The room was silent, save for the soft hum of energy that seemed to come from deep within the walls. "This is the vault," Thaler said, his voice echoing through the chamber. "Everything Mirren has ever learned, every truth, every secret we have uncovered, is contained here." Elias took a slow step forward, his eyes scanning the vast collection of knowledge before him. It was overwhelming. He had come here seeking answers, but the sheer amount of information was almost too much to comprehend. "This is more than I ever imagined," Elias said softly. Yalara stepped beside him. "It's both a gift and a burden. You will see things you never thought possible, and some things you may wish you hadn't seen." Elias turned to face her, his expression serious. "I'm ready." The king nodded. "Then enter. But remember, Commander, knowledge is not always a gift. It comes with great responsibility." With those words, Elias stepped into the vault. The doors slowly closed behind him, sealing him inside with the ancient secrets of the Mirren Empire. The doors of the vault slowly closed behind Elias, leaving him in complete silence. The chamber was vast, its high stone walls filled with countless shelves stacked with scrolls, tablets, and strange relics. The air was cool, almost ancient, and as he stepped deeper into the room, Elias could feel the weight of knowledge pressing in on him. It was like walking through time itself, the entire history of the Mirren people stored in this single, quiet place. Elias turned to look at the massive columns that held the shelves, their surfaces carved with intricate designs. Some glowed faintly with a blue light, while others were dark and aged. In the center of the room was a large stone pedestal, its surface covered in symbols he couldn't quite understand. "Take your time," Yalara's voice echoed from behind him. She had followed him into the vault, her presence both comforting and a reminder of the significance of this moment. "There is no rush. This place has waited for centuries." Elias nodded slowly. He had been granted access to the vault, yes, but now the real challenge began. What was he supposed to look for? What secrets would he uncover? The possibilities seemed endless, and the pressure of knowing that this knowledge could change the future weighed heavily on him. He stepped forward and reached for a nearby scroll. The moment his fingers brushed its surface, a soft hum filled the air. The symbols on the scroll glowed brighter, and a voice, clear but distant, filled his mind. "Welcome, human. You seek knowledge. The price of knowledge is understanding. Be careful what you seek." Elias pulled his hand back, startled. The voice had come from within him, as if the very vault was speaking directly to his mind. He glanced at Yalara, who seemed unfazed by the encounter. "It does that," she said quietly, her voice low. "The vault reacts to those who seek its secrets. It will guide you, but it will not be easy." Elias took a deep breath and looked around. There was so much to explore, so many things to learn. He knew he had to be careful. This wasn't just about acquiring power or learning new technologies. It was about understanding, and that came with its own dangers. He moved deeper into the vault, his eyes scanning the rows of texts and devices. Some of the objects seemed familiar, like ancient scientific instruments, while others were unlike anything he had ever seen. There were pieces of Mirren technology that hummed with an energy he couldn't quite grasp, and other artifacts that seemed to pulse with life. As he walked, Elias noticed a strange energy radiating from one particular shelf. It was a small, crystalline object resting on a pedestal, its surface shimmering in the dim light. The object seemed to call to him, its presence drawing him in. He reached out cautiously and picked it up. The moment his fingers touched the crystal, a sharp vision flashed before his eyes. He saw the stars, dozens of them, collapsing into black holes. Entire civilizations were consumed, one by one, as though they were nothing more than dust. But there, in the center of it all, was something else. A bright light, pulsing with energy, reaching out to connect all the dying stars. Elias gasped and pulled his hand back. The vision faded as quickly as it had come, leaving him breathless and shaken. The crystal was still warm in his hand, its glow dimming as he set it back on the pedestal. Yalara stepped forward, her eyes narrowing as she looked at the crystal. "You saw it, didn't you? The collapse. The end of everything." Elias nodded, still trying to catch his breath. "What was that? What does it mean?" Yalara's gaze softened and she took a step closer. "That vision. It's a warning. The Mirren Empire has kept that knowledge locked away for centuries. It's the fate of every star in the galaxy eventually. All will collapse, and there will be nothing left." Elias frowned. "But why show me that? Why give me this knowledge?" Yalara sighed, her expression grave. "Because it's not just about the end of the stars, it's about what happens after. We Mirrens have learned that the light in the center, the one you saw in the vision, can bring rebirth, but it requires something more than just technology. It requires sacrifice." Elias looked at her, his confusion deepening. "Sacrifice? What do you mean?" "The vault contains many secrets, Elias. Some of them are dangerous, others are far beyond our understanding. The Mirrens have always believed that with knowledge comes the ability to change fate. But it's not as simple as that." Elias turned back to the crystal, his mind racing. The vision had felt so real, so vivid. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was something important here, something that could change everything. The collapse of the stars, rebirth, sacrifice. It was a riddle he couldn't yet solve. "There is more to this than I understand," Elias said quietly. Yalara nodded. "Yes, and there's more for you to learn. But remember, knowledge has its consequences. Some truths can't be unlearned. Once you know them, they become a part of you." Elias took a deep breath, trying to steady his thoughts. "What do I do with this knowledge? How do I use it?" Yalara hesitated. "That is for you to decide. But know this. The choices you make now will shape the future of your people. What happens next will affect all of us, human and Mirren alike." Elias felt the weight of her words settle in his chest. He had come here seeking answers, but now he understood that the answers came with a heavy burden. The knowledge contained within the vault could change the course of history, but it was up to him to decide how it would be used. "Thank you," Elias said softly. "I'll take what I've learned seriously." Yalara gave him a small, reassuring smile. "I know you will." Elias turned back to the vault, feeling the weight of the galaxy upon his shoulders. The path ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain. Whatever he chose, it would change everything. The journey had begun as a mission of diplomacy, a simple escort job for a handful of Mirren diplomats. But for Elias Trent, everything had changed the moment he stepped into the Mirren ruins and saved Princess Yalara. The secrets he had uncovered in the Vault of Echoes had shattered his understanding of the galaxy, and now, standing at the threshold of a new future, he could no longer look at the stars in the same way. The Mirren king had granted him access to the greatest archive in their empire, the vault that held knowledge of long-lost technologies, forgotten histories, and even warnings of a future that could unravel everything. But the visions Elias had seen, the collapse of stars, the light of rebirth, the need for sacrifice, had haunted him. These were truths that could either save or destroy, depending on how they were used. Elias had returned to Earth, bringing with him not just the physical documents and artifacts he had discovered in the vault, but a deeper understanding of the universe. The Mirrens had offered him their wisdom, but Elias knew that humanity now had a choice to make, a choice that would determine their place in the stars. Standing at the front of the council chamber, Elias looked out at the assembly of human leaders. It was a small room, filled with faces both familiar and foreign, representing the united nations of Earth and the various planetary colonies. The weight of their gaze was heavy, but Elias had grown used to it. He had walked in their shoes before, but now he was different. The knowledge he carried was more powerful than any weapon. Commander Elias Trent, the council leader, President Maria Jensen, began, her voice steady but with a hint of curiosity. You have returned from your mission with a gift, an unexpected one. You have seen the Vault of Echoes. You have learned from the Mirrans. Elias nodded, taking a deep breath. The time had come to speak the truth, to share what he had learned and what it meant for humanity's future. Not just, "Learned, Madam President," Elias said, his voice firm. "I've seen things that will change everything. The Mirrans have knowledge beyond anything we could have imagined. But it's not just technology. It's a warning." The room fell silent. The weight of his words hung in the air. "Do you mean the vision of the stars collapsing?" A voice called from the back. It was General Drake, the head of Earth's military forces. His tone was skeptical but curious. "What does that mean? Is it a real threat?" Elias turned to face him. "Yes, General. It's real. It's the end of everything, if we do nothing. But it's also the beginning of something new. The Mirrans believe that when the stars die, they can be reborn. There's a way to stop the collapse, but it requires knowledge, and it requires sacrifice." "Sacrifice?" President Jensen repeated, raising an eyebrow. "What kind of sacrifice?" "That's the question," Elias said, his voice quieter. "Now. The Mirrans have never fully understood the cost of what they propose. They've kept the truth hidden for centuries. They believe that rebirth comes at a cost, one that may require giving up something precious." The room was still. Everyone was waiting for him to continue. "I've seen it in the vault," Elias went on. "The technology, the methods to stop the collapse, it's all there. But the Mirrans have never used it. They've been too afraid of what it might cost, and that's where we come in." He paused, letting his words sink in. He had already made the decision. The weight of it was heavy, but it was necessary. "We have the opportunity to change the future," Elias continued. "The knowledge in the vault could advance humanity's technology by centuries. We could solve energy crises, cure diseases, travel further into the galaxy. But we must decide what we're willing to risk. If we try to use it without understanding the consequences, we could destroy everything." General Drake stood up. "And what exactly are we supposed to do with this knowledge? Sit on it while the universe collapses around us? We're soldiers, Commander. We fight for survival. If we have the tools to save ourselves, we use them." "I understand that, General," Elias replied, his voice calm but firm. "But sometimes, survival means making choices that don't involve fighting. The power to save or destroy doesn't lie in weapons. It lies in how we use what we know. If we misuse this power, it could lead to our own destruction." President Jensen leaned forward, her eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "So, what are you proposing, Elias? Do we try to stop the collapse, or do we leave it to fate?" Elias met her gaze. "I'm proposing that we start by learning. We need to understand everything we can about the Mirran technology before we make any decisions. I've seen how fragile this all is, but we have a chance to make it work. We can work with the Mirrans, use their knowledge but on our terms. Together, we can ensure humanity's future and avoid the mistakes that nearly destroyed their empire." The room fell silent again. The weight of his words was undeniable. He had made his case, and now it was up to them. But Elias knew that. He had done everything he could. The future of humanity was in their hands, and they had the power to choose the path forward. Finally, President Jensen spoke, her voice steady. "We will consider your proposal, Commander. You've brought us a vision, a new chapter for humanity. But this is not something we can rush into. We'll need to weigh the consequences carefully." Elias nodded. "I understand. But whatever decision is made, humanity will no longer be the same. We've been given the chance to change the stars, but it's a decision we must make together." As Elias left the council chamber, he felt the weight of the decision still pressing on him. But he also felt something else: hope. The future was uncertain, but it was no longer an unknown void. Humanity had a path forward, a chance to shape its destiny in the stars. And with that hope, Elias knew that the story of Earth had only just begun.